So it's that time of the year again. It doesn't feel like 12 months ago, but we're back for another Cheltenham Festival Q&A.
Yeah.
And has the excitement built up as usual, Jamie? Are you pumped for this year's Cheltenham Festival?
Well, my hardest week is the week before Cheltenham rather than Cheltenham itself. And I find it a bit of a holiday once I'm down there next week. Only down there for 2 days. I'm getting too old for the full 4 days. Plus I've got work commitments, and anyone who's going to Cheltenham or who's been to Cheltenham knows that you really have to be part of the free and easy throng to enjoy it. Otherwise you just find it mildly annoying that you can't get to the paddock, you can't get to the stands. And you feel slightly aggrieved that people are having a good time and you're not necessarily. But from a working perspective, it is the biggest week of the year. It is the most exciting week of the year. And the more that we've talked about it, the more that you're getting up for it, and the more that you can see the beauty of certain races, the power of certain horses, and the conundrums that everyone, you, I, and everyone at home has got to deal with in the next week, 8 days.
Well, I've never felt more ATRI UK because we've got the Timeform marketing laptop up in front of us.
Fine.
We can see ourselves, we can see all the questions.
Please get the questions in. If I can't answer it, I can't answer it, but at least try and give you some answer, because it's not just my opinions. Obviously, I'm talking on behalf of lots of people at Timeform. If you watched the Timeform preview, Cheltenham preview night from Manchester, which was streamed, then great, you're ahead of the game. If not, don't worry, I'll try and sum up and summarise the general consensus thoughts. And what was interesting for me tonight was that obviously we all work for Timeform, but we've all got individual opinions and thoughts and strategies. But every now and then in certain races there was consensus, there was a collective opinion that something is the right price, that something is the wrong price, or that something is the one to beat. So we'll try and get that across. It's not just my opinion, but get involved, in touch with any horses that you fancy, any thoughts that you've got, and we, between us, will do our best to answer it.
It's a very simple concept as well. There should be a comment box below. Stick your question in and we'll try our best to answer it. And while we wait for those to come in, Jamie, I'm going to take the opportunity to ask you a few already prepared
Pre-prepared?
questions. That's it, Blue Peter questions.
These what you emailed me 5 minutes ago?
Yes.
Pre-prepared to the extent.
Well, I pre-prepared. And I'm going to start with a nice and simple question. Well, which race are you looking forward to the most?
The race I'm looking forward to the most this year is the Triumph Hurdle, believe it or not, because a couple of reasons. Number one is that it's still an open book regards the abilities and the qualities of most of those at the top of the market. Out of the 6 at the top of the betting, 5 of them are unbeaten for current connections, and all bringing together different qualities and different dynamics which you can hone in on. So that's very much a race that's something for everyone. There's no real point in asking certain people what they think, because you'll get various different answers, all legitimate, all well reasoned, all rational, but it's just a case of we don't know the abilities of these individual horses. So that's a really exciting element to this Cheltenham, because by and large in the championship races, even in the handicaps, the puzzle is in trying to work out the form, not in trying to work out the horses themselves in terms of how good they are. And the other reason why it's exciting me so much is that when you think of the Champion Hurdle this year, and we would no doubt be talking about that, there's a feeling that Bouverdare's got it easy this year. When you think of last year's juveniles, Defi Deseuil was head and shoulders above them, and he has stuttered his way through this campaign. None of the others in his crop have raised their game at all, but it's going to be a very different Champion Hurdle next year, all because of the collective power and strength of the juveniles that we've got. So it's a twofold excitement regards the Triumph Hurdle. I'm really interested to see who's the best of these, just really interested in myself. And 2, it's just really exciting for the future of hurdlers to re-raise that standard, to re-raise that bar, to see how good Bouverdare is, if indeed he's around next year. So it's for the here and now with the Triumph Hurdlers, and it's for the future with the Champion Hurdle class of this year developing into next year.
Okay, well, no one wants me to ask too many questions, and a plethora have come in already.
Excellent.
So the first one is from a chap called Mark Taylor. I can't confirm or deny whether that's football Mark Taylor.
Oh yeah.
But he wants to know about the ground. Now, it always
Expected
seems to be,
ground.
That's the one. It always seems to be good to soft, but is there a chance it could come up something different this year?
I hope not, because I did a detailed study about 10 days ago into searching out the handicappers in particular, who had spent the winter in the mud and who've got better form in the past on spring ground. So effectively trying to find those horses off the radar who come to life at Cheltenham. Now, I'm no meteorologist. I can't even pronounce the word, let alone be one. I'm no turfologist in the terms of I don't know. Me and Kirkland Tellwright are the same. We don't know how to maintain our ground at all. But I am prepared for this eventuality in terms of, have a look at the article. There's loads of horses on a short list there who could revive for different ground. And I think the bottom line with trying to assess the ground is this. That Cheltenham is notorious for draining quickly, and that a small amount of dry, windy conditions will make a big difference to the ground, and that even if we start on soft, we may well finish on good or close to good. So I think the bottom line is with the ground is that even if it is soft, it's not going to be winter soft. I very much doubt that. So there is still that element to factor in of these horses who've achieved their form in the winter, in the mud, now facing different ground. It might be slightly different ground, it might be vastly different ground, but it will be different ground. That's always something to keep in mind. But it's a guessing game as to how much rain they get. It's a guessing game as to what impact the beast from the east has had. But by and large, I'm still predicting that it's odds on that it'll be good to soft rather than softer.
Now, I've got another ground question here, and it sort of leads into it well, actually, because Sean has asked whether...
Is it Sean with an EAN or
EAN, yeah. Scene. Sean has asked if there's any chance that Sam Crow could run in the Supreme. I know there's been a few people talking about this on Twitter, if the ground comes up a bit deeper.
Yeah, well, it's kind of related to what I was saying, in that they've expressly said that the only way they'll entertain Sam Crow running in the Supreme is if it is either soft or worse than that, as in heavy. And I think that the balance of probability strongly suggests that it's not going to be soft or heavy, even on the Tuesday, in which case I think it's highly unlikely that Sam Crow will even be given that ticket. So don't forget, it's 48-hour decks this year for all races at Cheltenham, which means by Sunday morning around 10:30, 11 o'clock, we will have a definitive answer of Sam Crow's destination, because I don't think he can enter in the Supreme if he intended to run in the Ballymore. I don't think he can even do that. But I'm not expecting at all to see Sam Crow's name in the Supreme decks.
Nice, firm answer. That's what we like. And Tommy has asked about Fahine and Douvan, of course, both coming back from long injuries. What do you think about both of those? Will we see the real deal with those two, or is it going to be a big ask?
It's a really interesting point, that, Tommy, isn't it? Because we've got two horses in those races who have got the best form, who have got the highest rating. Fahine, dating back, has got a better figure than Bouverdere, and Douvan still stands tall. He has still been to ratings places that neither Altior nor Min has ever been to. So the two really significant shadows over both those races. And it was at the Cheltenham preview night the other evening when Martin Dixon was talking, and he said, can you imagine if you got to next Saturday, so 9 days' time, and either Fahine or Douvan was to win? It's totally logical, it's totally explainable, and you'd be sort of half kicking yourself if one or both, believe it or not, of those were to win. And you sort of knew that there was some black and white issues in those races, and you didn't act on it, because if we'd have gone back, it's probably even 4 months rather than 12 months, the prices that you're getting or can get about Douvan and Fahine are pretty ridiculous compared to what you thought they were. So it's the recency bias at play. There is an element, obviously, with fitness or fragility with both. We are dealing with Willie Mullins, and Douvan is far too precious a commodity for him not to have that horse 100% rip-raring ready to go if he did indeed get that engagement. So, yeah, in answer to the question is that is suddenly becoming a strategy, I think. The more people are looking at it, the more people are saying, well, it's sort of an easy sell to get involved with one or both of those horses, just because there's a lot of question marks at Cheltenham, and there aren't many races where you can categorically say that horse A is better than its rivals. But in both those cases, there is strong evidence to point that Forheen is better than his rivals and Douvan is better than his rivals. And it's all of the sort of theoretical data around them, or the very factual data in terms of we haven't seen one for a long time, we haven't seen the other firing fully for a longish time as well, that's in there. So personally, I'm still struggling with that, but generally on a collective level, that is suddenly, as Tommy has said there, that's suddenly becoming on the radar and becoming a really good way into these Cheltenham races to say, well, I know how good these horses are, I've seen how good Willie Mullins is at preparing similar horses for big targets, and therefore it's an opportunity. Some people will see it as a danger sign, some people see it as an opportunity, and I think the closer we get to next week, the more and more people are sort of shifting sides into that opportunity angle and thinking, well, the prices they are, I'm willing to take that chance.
Now, we've got a question. We've mentioned very quickly Douvan, and he's of course running against Altior, and now a lot of the focus in that race is on the big three, Douvan, Altior and Maine, if they all run. But we've got here a question from John who's asking about, well, a bit of each way thievery. Is there any potential runners at a big price that could sneak into a place? He's put up Ordinary World at 50 to 1.
Yeah. Who said that, John?
John, yeah.
You look for certain markets at Cheltenham, the more appealing ones, because don't forget that these markets have been up for months on end now and very static. The only times these market moves is when you have key trials, or there's rumours that are founded or unfounded, but by and large the market knows first, and the market therefore, especially when the bookmakers price it very defensively, not inviting you in. So you see markets with a different eye, and you're trying to come up in your mind with a scenario whereby it's a good market to play in. Now, collectively the night at the Timeform preview night, we talked about the betting without Bouverdere market as a really appealing market for people to get stuck into. And of course, we're coming back to the point of Tommy's point of, well, Forheen is an attractive proposition at his price. But I think even Tommy would agree, and most people watching this will agree, that there's not really going to be an in-between with Forheen. It's going to be an all or nothing. It's going to be a bold win or a tame blowout, because it feels like a last hurrah for Forheen, and therefore he's going to lay everything out on the table, and then they just hope that the old Forheen is in there somewhere. And that brings us to the champion chase, in that you're looking for ways in, you're looking for scenarios. And the one thing with this champion chase is that we're certainly going to have two big guns butting heads. We might well have three if Douvan is given the go-ahead. And in that sort of case, it's almost like a boxing scenario where they're going to be trading blows left, right and centre, allowing the way for something to sneak in, not for the win, but certainly for the play. So when you think back to Ordinary World, and he was the one in the Arkle last year, wasn't he, who just sort of crept into it late. And the same strategy with him in this year's champion chase, we'll see him finish when you'd think that even one or two of the big guns are blown out the backsides by that point, at that end point of the race. So that is it's a good point to make, that, John, about Altior and about an each way feel to the market with that, in that this could easily be a race where you get big priced horses coming in second and third, all because a showdown, or a three-way showdown as we might get, is going to do some damage to one of those big guns.
Now, I've got two novice chasers that people have asked about, so I'm going to band them together, even though they're in different races. Josh wants to know about St Calvados, how strong a chance has he got, and Thomas wants to know about Black Horton, potentially a forgotten runner in the RSA.
Yeah. Black Horton. This is the power of Nichols, why this horse has got a sequence. He's identifying of the right campaign for that sort of horse. But we've got potentially two really good horses, and maybe it's more than that in the RSA. And horses who've run less than him have achieved more than Black Horton already. We're thinking about, in particular, presenting Percy. We're also thinking about those first four, not just the first one or two, but the first four from that Grade 1 Flogas at the Dublin Racing Festival at Leopardstown. And the feeling is that Black Horton is going to be outmatched, overmatched, a bit out of his pay grade when he goes into that company. So I'm not here to just massage everyone's egos and say, yeah, good point, great point. I'm here to sort of express what I think and what we think collectively at Timeform. And the general feeling is, Thomas, that Black Caughton has got plenty on his plate. And in fact, in some ways, that sequence of ones next to his name is slightly misleading about his true power, because when you think of the races in which those wins have been achieved and the way in which they've been achieved, partly by others falling by the wayside, partly because he's so straightforward and such a good jumper, I'm not sure that Black Caughton's going to impact in the RSA.
If he does need luck on his side, how much luck? That's a bit of a daft question, but he got the Fountains Windfall, who, of course, he fell late on at Kempton. How many do you think would need to underperform for Black Caughton to take his seat at the table and say, actually, I've got a chance here?
Well, having said all that about Black Caughton, we know his limits, we know what he can do, and the suspicion is he's not classy enough. I'd have said exactly the same thing about Black Lion a couple of years ago, but his jumping technique, his attitude and his racing style all combined to mean that he won the RSA, defeating some so-called bigger guns who were either ill-prepared or ill-equipped to deal with the specific demands of that race. So there's certainly a scenario, and you don't need too much luck on your side, whereby one or two don't fire fully, in which case Black Caughton might finish third, might finish second, and then of course you've got that might win. So what I'd say about Black Caughton is that on all known form and on all known potential and impressions, he's not good enough for an RSA. But we've been here before with the RSA, and horses like Black Caughton, their experience and their track craft tends to count for a lot more than you might think. So not much would have to go wrong with the rest for him to play a big part in the finish.
Now, I'm going to steal a word of yours when we talk about St Calvados, because I was at Leopardstown the other week and I saw Footpad take on Petit Mouchoir, and they were both impressive in their own way. St Calvados, of course, is a British runner. Has his campaign been less sexy, and is that why he's as big a price he is, or does he have to find a little bit to take on those two?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, I think, because his campaign is less sexy than Footpad's for sure. His connections, who he represents, are less sexy than Footpad when it comes to being there and done that at a big festival. And that combined means the discrepancy in price between St Calvados and Footpad is bigger than it probably should be, is bigger than the prices are making out, and is bigger than the facts of the story don't reflect how good a horse St Calvados is. And when you get a horse like St Calvados, who goes from the front, who's buccaneering, who's bold, who basically strangles the opposition from a long way out, it's hard to get a true appreciation of him. One of the things we've got at Timeform is obviously our time analysis, which we are honing and sophisticating all the time. And here's the thing with St Calvados, all the data around his wins is really, really impressive. It marks him out that, yeah, you know what you are seeing is for real. He is as good as he looks. But the point with the Arkle and the point with St Calvados is that as brilliant as St Calvados times are, Footpad's times are even more monstrous. I mean, it's absolutely freakish what Footpad is doing, not only to the opposition, but also against the clock. So I just want to make that point of there's loads to like, loads to love, loads to appreciate with St Calvados, especially those time figures that he's got, where he's done all his own work and gone hard from the front. But as good as he is, Footpad has never let him get away in terms of their relationship on ratings and on time figures, and Footpad has always just been one step ahead of him. So it's one of those hard calls whereby if the ground was heavy, then St Calvados, with his style and with his power and with his physical presence, I would say that gap is going to drastically reduce in terms of the betting as it is. But it's just that I want to reaffirm the point that saying that Footpad is great isn't undermining St Calvados at any point. It's just saying that, wow, St Calvados has done amazing things on the clock, but Footpad has done even better.
So do you think that St Calvados should be in front of Petit Mouchoir in the market? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that is a good way to put it, that the second best horse in the race for sure, on form, on times, on visual impressions, is St Calvados. It's a bit unfair on Petit Mouchoir in that It's not his fault he's had only 2 goals over fences. It's not his fault that he was messing against footpad off a difficult preparation when he'd had a setback and been off for a while. But on what we've seen so far, saying Calvados is Cheltenham ready right now, and you're not sure that Petit Mouchoir is, because he's missed much of the winter and because he's basically given a lesson by footpad last time.
Okay, from novice chasers to novice hurdlers, and Steve wants to know about Radician, who's been so exciting so far this season. But in particular, will he act around Cheltenham?
Festival form's crucial when it comes to Cheltenham. Our team did some research in the handicaps. There's 10 handicaps over the Cheltenham Festival. Mm-hmm. Last year, 5 of them were won by horses who'd been there and done that as far as running with distinction at the festival is concerned. And that applies to the championship races, or more to the point, the novice juvenile races, where it doesn't matter that a horse hasn't been at Cheltenham. It's probably the focal point with Radician now, but it's the one and only focal point. Now, my answer would be that it wouldn't concern me at all. It wouldn't concern me at all that Radician hasn't been to Cheltenham. And that's because, despite the fact that he's only been at Kempton for his 3 starts over hurdles, he has probably got the best education of any juvenile in the Triumph Hurdle. And I say that because the first race he ran over hurdles, they went so hard up front that that everything was basically out on its backside by the finish. It was a real test of stamina. And Radician, as Radician does, didn't really turn a hair, came through, won that. Jumping wasn't great, but coped with that environment. The second time he ran, they just crawled round essentially. And again, apart from his jumping, he dealt with that scenario perfectly. And then last time in the Adonis, do you call it? I think so, yeah. The better ground, better jumping by him, different scenario, again came through it very, very smoothly. So it's one of those odd circumstances where the one thing I'd say about Radician is that despite the fact he's only done it at Kempton, he has got one of the best educations of any horse in the Triumph, all because he's faced different grounds, different types of races, different types of horses, and you can see along the way how the education has impacted on him, because his jumping was actually an asset the last time we saw him rather than a fault. So it's hard to find fault with Radician. I wouldn't crab him because he hasn't been to Cheltenham, and the hill factor, don't worry about that. He's a really strong stayer, both over hurdles from what we've seen so far and on the flat going back. The problem with him and the problem with the Triumph is that it's hard to find fault with 4 or 5 of those that we've seen so far. But on that specific point, Steve, don't worry, I'd say, about Radician not having been to Cheltenham, because in terms of the way the race is going to be run, he really is Triumph ready, given what he's come through already.
Okay, hope that helps, Steve, and have a look for another question. There's plenty of questions about dress code. God's Own, potentially forgotten a little bit. David wants to know whether you think he could run well in the Champion Chase.
Well, Dan Barber, who often sits in this seat or one of these seats, just said to me earlier this afternoon, I think the time for the direct debit has come again, because certainly last year and probably for the last 3 years, Dan's backed God's Own without the favourites in the Champion Chase. It was heartbreaking last year when the horse finished 4th, I think.
Normally is heartbreak for
when
Dan
it finished
at the Cheltenham Festival.
Betting without Duvan, and the horse finished 4th, having looked like he might win 2 out. But he was back on board with it again today and saying that I've looked at the race, and God's Own is the one who suddenly is appearing on the radar as back to that point of just being the right fit for the race, and that God's Own probably is going to be ridden, especially with what happened last year, to pick up the pieces to who are up, and that sort of style will help him. So a good point to make with God's Own, and even though I haven't looked at it in depth, Dan Barber himself was saying only this afternoon that he's going to click that direct debit once again, I think, on God's Own.
And whilst I've got you on the Champion Chase, Special Tiara, of course, won it last year. It did cut up, admittedly, with Duvan pulling up. Is he got a big ass to defend his crown?
Yeah, because we saw very vividly in the Dublin Chase, the Grade 1 won by Min at the Leopardstown Festival, that when you're up against the calibre of horses that Special Tiara is now in, that all he acts is his launch pad really for their ability. In that the reason Min was so good that day is because Special Tiara, along with Alicia Dulon, did their normal stuff, providing him with a real runway to take off and for his talent to shine. So Special Tiara is in all it ends up in terms of it's probably not going to be as fast a ground as he likes, but moreover, his hard on his sleeve style actually just acts as a converter of class for the likes of Duvan, even though it wasn't last year because Duvan had his issues, but Min certainly. And can you imagine Altior in that setup of race? He's crying out for a race against Special Tiara so he can turn it on at the end.
Okay. Jason said you should only be thinking about time when you're in prison. Well, we're advocates of the stopwatch here at Timeform, aren't we? So Stephen wants to know about Slate House and how he can be 25-1 where Somerville Boys 10s and Kalashnikov is 5s. Is he great value if the other two improved past him?
I did a preview the other night at Toaster and Ollie Bell was on the panel, and Ollie Bell said exactly that point. How on earth can Slate House be that price when the form that ties in with Somerville Boy and with Kalashnikov obviously on that related form line? And it does seem an odd state of affairs, and it's often a good policy with Cheltenham, especially we talked about the top with a different ground, to not just look at the more recent form and to go back into the autumn and see what happened then and see what you can gain from that. And that is the perfect example of a horse who the price he is doesn't fit the form that he's got, and it may be that you have to go back in time a little to find that form, but by the same token it means a lot that it's there. And the impression, Nick, just the general impression is that Colin Tizard is sort of getting back or got back on a roll now, and there was a time in midwinter where you couldn't trust his horses in terms of some weren't firing, some weren't finishing, but collectively they all seem to be coming good now, and he's one of those horses who you can easily see on the day coming more and more on the radar because, as you've identified, Stephen, that form line exists and it suggests that he is overpriced the way that he currently is.
Okay. Let's have a look. Billy's asking about Mr. Adjudicator, who of course is really impressive at Leopardstown. Plenty of impressive runners there, and he wants to know whether you think Paul Townend will keep the ride or whether Ruby will get the leg up.
So,
a lot of politics here, isn't there, I suppose, with...
Yeah, let's deal with the horse first, because I know that Jason doesn't like his times only in prison, but perhaps the most significant time performance of the whole season was that Mr. Adjudicator and Sam Crow ran on the same card on that Sunday of Irish Champions Weekend. Irish Champions Weekend, that's a
Dublin Racing Festival. There you go. Yeah.
And that from the first hurdle to the winning line, Mr. Adjudicator was in front of Sam Crow at every stage in that race. Now, Sam Crow wasn't asked to run a fast time, he was just asked to run faster than others. And we've seen in flashes that Sam Crow is capable of running fast, very fast, whilst it all coming easy to him at certain stages. But it is still significant that Mr. Adjudicator could clock that time when it's put up against Sam Crow, when you see it like that. As for the jockey bookings, the jockey bookings obviously reflect the stable in terms of who's first, second and third string, and we have to talk about third strings because it looks like Willie Mullins is going to run 3 in this. Mr. Adjudicator for 1, Stormy Island and Soldier the other 2. Those two both once-raced dark horses who couldn't have won any easier on their first runs for Willie Mullins, and we don't know how good they are. So, put it this way, if Ruby Walsh wanted to ride Mr. Adjudicator, he would, no doubt about it. Absolutely, stable first string. Unfortunately for Paul Townend, all of those horses who he's ridden and guided and taught through the season, amongst other riders there, is going to get the old Spanish Archer when it comes to Cheltenham. And rightly so. Why wouldn't you want someone who's ridden 56 winners and as good as Ruby Walsh at the festival than that? So if Ruby Walsh wants to ride Mr. Adjudicator, he certainly will. But there is that burning question of, is Mr. Adjudicator actually the first string from Willie Mullins? Because no sooner had Mr. Adjudicator won that grade 1 from Far Class, that he sort of reminded the press rather than the way around. That I've still got this Stormy Island here and she's had a bit of a setback, but she's still going for the triumph as well. So it'll be really interesting to see the jockey bookings when it comes through, because there's a feeling and there's just a suggestion that both Stormy Island and Saldier are sort of considered in the same league as Mr. Adjudicator, certainly from the homework. So the politics is quite simple in that Ruby will ride what he wants to ride and what they think has got the best chance. But it's fascinating, along with the whole landscape of the Triumph Hurdle, that Willie Mullins is still showing so much faith in these two really dark horses, when Mr. Adjudicator has already won a Grade 1, has already got that big time performance behind him, and has already got the flat background to think that he'll handle a race such as the Triumph Hurdle.
Okay, so Keith wants to ask a laying question. Would you consider laying Kalashnikov for a place in the Supreme?
Martin Dixon would. I never heard him more vociferous than he was at the Cheltenham preview night when he was saying Kalashnikov place lay, get against Kalashnikov. And it's a simple theory with that, in that you'll see on the Timeform race card that Kalashnikov is certainly in the Premier League of those Supreme novice contenders because of what he did in the Betfair Hurdle. But it's because he ran in a race like the Betfair Hurdle why he is on the front row of the grid theoretically for the Supreme, in that environment up against older established horses on really testing ground. That is the perfect playground to achieve a big figure, and that's what he did. Now, Martin's point is twofold, in that despite what people think and the sort of retrospective analysis, Kalashnikov loves heavy ground. And I know that some people were trying to sort of fit a square peg in a round hole, saying, well, how come he got beat in the Tolworth and never looked comfortable? If Kalashnikov didn't relish heavy ground, then he wouldn't have won the Betfair Hurdle. It's as simple as that, because that was gruelling, that was extreme. And you can see for yourself from the finish of the Betfair Hurdle how horses who, in theory, handle the mud were all out, a long way out, and he handled conditions brilliantly. And that, in a way, is linked into the fact that Kalashnikov, in the Betfair Hurdle, ran to a Supreme novice level. Did he do it at the wrong time? In terms of, he sort of peaked then. We've got a collection of horses who have been saved and kept the powder dry for this specific assignment. They didn't play the same game as Kalashnikov, but when they do get to play that game, i.e. all bets are off, all straps are off, everything's laid out for the Supreme, that they are going to jump over his level. So it's that dubious angle of the Betfair Hurdle. Was that quite as good as it looked, given the nature of the race, and more importantly, the nature of the ground? And secondly, given that all the other horses in the Supreme, every single one, has been building up and lining up to show the best at this point, is it a case of perhaps leaving his Cheltenham potential or Cheltenham chances behind at Newbury? So I can see the point totally with what Martin Dixon was saying, in that if you don't fancy him, why wouldn't you place lay him? Why wouldn't you get against him in a match bet? Because there could be not just one, not just a Get a Bird, or not just a Paloma Blue, or not just a Somerville Boy who goes past him, but probably 4 or 5 got the potential to leapfrog Kalashnikov. So yeah, in answer to Keith, there's some really solid logic behind Martin's suggestion or recommendation, or just telling you what he's going to do about getting against Kalashnikov in the Supreme.
Wouldn't be the first Betfair Hurdle winner to get to know. I'm right in thinking My 10 Till Yours was he a bet? Did he win the Betfair Hurdle?
That was before. We had enough data to be confident that actually there is a relationship between exposing yourself in a handicap and reproducing that figure in the Supreme, because me and probably everyone at Timeform, we couldn't be fingerprinted for 6 months after, because our fingers were so burnt by touching My 10 to Yours at 5 to 2, 11 to 4, in the absolute convinced theory that, hang on, all he's got to do was reproduce what he did at Newbury and he'd be too hot for these novices. Champagne Fever gunned him down, and it was a harsh lesson to learn, but it was a lesson that you can almost peak too soon when it comes to a novice who's headlong going for the Supreme.
This year could be the year for My 10 Till Yours. So it's been 30 odd minutes and we've finally had a Gold Cup question. Two horses here, Josh and Neil, have put up Definitely Red and Native River, with thinking about the ground. If it comes up soft, are they the two to side with?
Yeah, if it comes up soft, then Native River is obviously your first port of call almost for the race, because it's more the play that he's got, the fact that he is such a strong stayer, the fact that he is so uncomplicated, and the fact that he just keeps galloping. And if the ground conditions are soft on Friday, it plays to the strengths of Native River. It blunts the potential speed edge or class edge that a Might Bite or a Sizing John might have. Our Duke is obviously the other horse who fits into that same boat, the watery boat, as Native River, all because he won the Irish Grand National last year. A brilliant performance for a novice, but it showed you that he's all about one thing, and that's stamina. The other one was Definitely Red, who's definitely interesting because we had on Trials Day the Cotswold Chase, which was won by Definitely Red, and I was sort of guilty of going, Definitely Red's won. The bookmakers were sort of certainly of the opinion of Definitely Red's won, that's not going to win the Gold Cup, I'll box him off. But when you think about the trials that have happened ever since Might Bite won his King George, there hasn't been a single conclusive bit of form or performance that makes you think that there's something really put the hand up and said, I'm a real Gold Cup contender. And the more times have gone on, the more you sort of think that Definitely Red, his ability, what he showed in the Cotswold Chase, might be enough to grab him a place. And certainly on the figures, on his Timeform rating, will be good enough to get third in quite a few renewals of the Gold Cup. So, interesting one there, especially with the murky picture we've got and the question marks against a lot of Gold Cup contenders. Definitely Red has had a really smooth run in to the Gold Cup this year. Everything that's been asked of him, he's done. He's been asked to do everything in the right way in terms of getting him to a boil for Cheltenham. He's been there and done that now with that course form. So there's quite a lot to like about Definitely Red, if only for the solidity factor rather than that star quality, which the suspicion is that one or two others might have still.
Okay, well, Josh is way back in just asking about Might Bite, and would you lay him, or where do you stand on Might Bite?
No, I mean, I do have to talk personally rather than reflecting the whole of Timeform here. But I wouldn't lay Might Bite at all. No way at all would I lay Might Bite. And I know that we've got history, we've got a track record of him certainly idling, and then more erratically what he did in the RSA last year when he nearly ran off the track, obviously. But my interpretation is that we're over-focusing on that negative when the positives far outweigh that. We've got a horse who has won his last five, has won a King George, and they could have gone round again at Kempton and he'd have held Bay, double shuffle and T for three in exactly the same way, because we've got this track record. Might Bite is billed as the bad boy of chasing, all because of what he did in the RSA last year, and therefore we expect him to do things which are unusual, or we've got a certain expectation that he won't do things as we expect. So we've got a horse who everyone says he's a bit funny, he's a bit flawed, he'll never win by far, he's not flashy. We've got all that evidence there. And then when he did exactly all of those things in the King George at Kempton, everyone said, ooh, I don't like what I see there, because he hasn't turned it on, he hasn't won at a Gold Cup horse. Where the case for the prosecution is exactly the same as the case for the defence. The one horse who I think has got the most ability in there, and in his Timeform top rated in the race, is Might Bite. And for that reason, I wouldn't lay Might Bite at all. We conducted a quick straw poll that I managed to rescue after Dan asked, can you put your hands up if you wouldn't back Might Bite, or if you would back Might Bite based on that? Yeah. But it was about 40% of the audience said that they wouldn't touch Might Bite based on what he's done before, his previous misdemeanours. But I'd say take his other offences into account, and those offences are really positive in terms of the way he jumps, the engine that he's clearly got, the way that he minds himself almost when it comes to plotting a path towards Cheltenham. That's all perfect. So just from my point of view, I wouldn't lay Might Bite, even if he was 6 legs clear on the running and started to look over towards the Guinness 10.
Okay, so what are your views on Waiting Patiently, who of course was such
Yeah.
a brilliant winner last month? Will he turn up? I know we'll find out on Sunday, but do you think, what's your feeling about this?
The feeling is, just bouncing off what Ruth Jefferson and Malcolm before have said all along, is that Cheltenham is not a preoccupation with them generally, and not with Waiting Patiently. So we're always guilty, we're often guilty, you, me, everyone watching at home, of reading between the lines. Of trainer said, well, X, Y and Z, and we think, oh, LM and O. That's what he's really saying, or that's what she's really saying. But in actual fact, we've just got to sometimes take what trainers say at face value. And with an operation like Malcolm Jefferson and Ruth Jefferson now, you do, by and large, they say exactly what they're going to do, and they do it. They target certain races, they tell you about that, and they're not preoccupied or obsessed with Cheltenham like some of us. So I'd say that from what they've always said, the owner and the trainer, past and present, Waiting Patiently is unlikely to turn up in the Ryanair. If he did turn up, be favourite over under Sir. I think he should be favourite over under Sir. Brilliant performance at Ascot. We don't know his limits, and there's a feeling on my part that under Sir has got more to do this year with or without Waiting Patiently than he did when he was the same price last season.
Okay, I'm not going to tell you who's asked this question.
Yeah.
I want to see if you can guess. Quite simply says, should Everton sack Sam Allardyce?
Phil Turner.
It is Phil Turner, yeah.
Of course they should, Phil. You know better than me. Allardyce out.
Okay, Donald
Hashtag Allardyce out.
Hashtag Allardyce. Written it down as well. Donald wants to know about Apple's Jade. Banker, yay or nay?
Phil Turner, who we've just mentioned there, Timeform stalwart, Chase handicapper, has gone for his banker bet of the meeting in our horses to follow extra pamphlet. It's not a pamphlet, it's more than that. Magazine. Let's call it a magazine. Let's call it a magazine. Anyway, we were each asked for a banker, a long shot-ish, and a handicap bet. But Phil's banker is Apple's Jade, and he, more or less, his thinking was that, look, she'd be second favourite for a champion hurdle, she'd be favourite for a Stays hurdle, and this is the easy option for her. And basically, she's taking... it's a little bit underwhelming with Apple's Jade, because when you get a mare who's as good as she is and as classy as she is, you want to really test her against the best of the males and not just up against her own sex. And by and large, Apple's Jade is a shoe-in for the mare's hurdle. It's probably a weaker race. When you think last year we had Vroom Vroom Mag and Let's Dance, was it? Or Limini.
Yeah.
We had Vroom Vroom Mag and Limini, who both went there in full health and in full expectation. And Apple's Jade saw those both off. Vroom Vroom Mag's retired this week.
Yeah.
Limini.
Not sure about Lemony. Is she
Well,
injured?
yeah. I haven't seen or heard much from Limini.
No.
Anyway. But by and large, Apple's Jade has got an easier task this year. So the question is, will Apple's Jade mess up? You know, have a look at her record, have a look at her ledger. Messing up is not in her makeup. Whenever she's expected to win a race, she does. Whenever she's not expected to win a race, she often still does anyway.
Okay, I'm going to spin that around a little bit as well. Here's Apple's Jade. I've just bought her for you. Where would you send her?
Or the Stays, I think.
The Stays?
Yeah, I think that her defeat of Super Sunday really emphasised what her strengths are, and that is essentially galloping hard for a long time. So I think that Apple's Jade would be favourite for the Stays hurdle, and I think, frankly, that she would probably win the Stays hurdle, getting £7 off Sam Spinner and co. So I think Apple's Jade probably should be going for the Stays and probably would win the Stays. And therefore she's going to win the mares, isn't she? If you think like that.
You'd think so. Simon wants to know about the Per Temps. Who Dares wins. What do you think about him?
That is the Alan King horse. I haven't looked at every single horse in all the handicaps, of course, but I do know the value of Who Dares wins, and I do know the value of Alan King when it comes to plotting horses towards the festival path. Now, this horse, we haven't seen him much over hurdles this season, but what was clear from last season on the flat, last summer, was that he'd raised his game a bit there, and he's yet to transfer all of that to hurdling. So there is significant dots to be joined with him in the Pertemps, especially when we're back to that point of better ground. Better ground could make a big difference to him. So yeah, wouldn't put you off him. And there's There's various boxes ticked with him, including one that says that actually on that flat form, he could be even better than he's currently in handicap mark for sure.
Now, we were talking earlier about the Gold Cup and your 5 favourite renewals. And,
oh yeah.
And there was some vintage renewals in there. And Peter wants to know about this year's renewal. Do you think it's a good one or a poor one? And from, I suppose, from both a Timeform perspective and your own gut instinct, where do you think it could rank? Think this could be a vintage renewal, or do you think it's an average renewal?
No, I think it's an average renewal. I think it really is, and I think that you've got to look at the division as a whole this year to arrive at that conclusion. Last year's Gold Cup, Sizing John won it. He won it decisively, but he didn't win it emphatically, and the field wasn't really strung out behind him. And I know that he went on and won again at Punchestown, but that was by a short head or a nose. So all along, from this point last season, there hasn't been a staying chaser that's announced himself as above what you'd normally expect a Grade 1 chaser to look like. There's 2 horses, I think, in this year's Gold Cup who could still achieve greatness in terms of a rating, in terms of a CV. And I think they are Mike Bite, who obviously is unbeaten all along. And if he really fancied it, and if he really turned it on one day, you could see something spectacular by him. He could easily run to 180 if his mind took him. And the other one we must mention in that same sort of category is Kilulta Vic, who I think that was going to win the Irish Gold Cup last time, but for that unfair fall, yet another unfair experience on that horse, which has more or less blighted his career. But there's been times from Kilulta Vic where he's looked an absolute monster, an absolute superstar. He hasn't been able to put it all together because of circumstances, because of injuries, because of luck. But it's really significant that Willie Mullins is pointing him still to the Gold Cup, despite what happened to him in the Irish Gold Cup and despite that fragility behind him. But I would say that he's the only other horse, along with Mike Bite, who still has the capacity to do something outrageous in a Gold Cup. So at the minute, Peter, it's not a vintage Gold Cup, not at all. We won't be talking about this Gold Cup in years to come based on all the evidence in this division this year. But there's still one big hand in Mike Bite and one little hand in Kilulta Vic who could still shoot up and announce himself as a crack chaser.
It could be an average renewal though, and Mike Bite could repeat his dramatics, and we could be talking about it for that reason.
Exactly, yeah, we could be.
Mark's asked about Cause of Causes. He's got one of the best Cheltenham Festival records. What's his chances this year?
He was a answer on the Timeform quiz, the Timeform Cheltenham Preview Night quiz, 10 questions. One of the answers was Cause of Causes, and the question was, whose Cheltenham Festival form figures read 7-2-1-1-1? How many ones?
3 ones.
1-1-1. Yeah. Most people got that. But history tells us, A, that this horse is prepared for one day alone. By and large, obviously he's got really good record on the Grand National. And B, he acts really well at Cheltenham. Now, something different here with the cross-country chase for him. But in terms of ability, now that the race is no longer a handicap, farcically a handicap once, where the handicappers try to assess horses based on all form when you've clearly got a unique discipline, it means the class counts for a lot. It means that the list for a potential winner of the cross-country chase, when it was a handicap, it was like that. Now it's a conditions race, it's like that. And the class still counts for a lot. And that David Cleary was one person on the panel who wanted to make mention of the cross-country chase and wanted to say that of the 4 or 5 horses through the week that are about the 5-2 mark, surely Cause of Causes was the best bet out of them, all because of his Cheltenham record, all because he's been there and done that, all because of Gordon Elliott, and all because of the nature of the race, which really rewards class. And we know that Cause of Causes is one of the handful of horses in there who could turn his attentions to a graded chase still if needs be.
Got some news actually. Phil's messages on here saying that Sizing John's out of the Gold Cup apparently. Yeah, Jessica Harrington tweeted 10 minutes ago, so that's a shame if it is indeed.
Well, that is a shame. That is a shame because we've got last year's winner who's going to be a barometer to this year's race. So but that's really interesting. Dan Barber would be really interested in that. One of the points he made, he's a big Our Duke fan, one of the points he made the other night was that he said, I wish that Robbie Power was riding Our Duke rather than Noel Feely. A, because he knows the horse, and B, because Our Duke's lapses in concentration with his jumping this year, which has been evident, he really needs a Robbie Power style jockey, regardless that Robbie Power knows him really well, to fire him into fences rather than the sort of Noel Feely quiet style of letting him jump his fences. Sort of two brilliant jockeys in Robbie Power and Noel Feely, but two different jockeys in terms of style and how they get the most out of the horse. So presumably now Robbie Power will switch to Our Duke, and that is in theory quite a big boost to Our Duke in terms of having that partnership re-established with, it's never broken that partnership because Noel Feely was being on it for the first time in Gold Cup, but maintaining that partnership between the two. So big news, which is to the Gold Cup itself. Last year's winner won't be returning. Does it change the dimensions of the Gold Cup? Well, not really. In terms of sizing John's style meant that he wasn't going to pressure the pace too much. But it is impactful to the Gold Cup in that it's another one who's down. It dilutes the race that bit more, and perhaps for those of you who like to look at things differently, it's perhaps a big boost to Our Duke in that he will now have Robbie Power on side. And between them, they've done great things already, Irish Grand National, but more to the point, Our Duke needs Robbie Power really to show his best. That's the sort of theory. So big news with perhaps big consequences, especially if you're an Our Duke fan.
Okay, we've hit 7 o'clock, so I'm going to let you play Clattenburg here.
Yeah.
We're in injury time. How many more questions would you like to answer?
We can do 5 more questions, no doubt.
Okay. 5 to go, so still a chance. Do comment them in and we'll try and answer all 5. Now, there's a horse here that I remember being mentioned on Tuesday night, I think by Dan in the bumper, AC Milan.
AC Milan.
Has he got a lot in the arsenal?
What time does that kick off? Soon?
It's kicked off.
For that,
yeah.
is it?
I can tell you the score actually if you like. Well,
you look up the score and I'll talk about AC Milan.
2-0
Never
to
in
Arsenal.
this world.
2-0 to Arsenal.
Alan Brazil was saying this morning talks, but I can't have Arsenal. 2-0 to Arsenal.
Wenger in.
So AC Milan in the bumper. The bumper is known as the National Hunt Flat Race, or the National Hunt Flat Race is known as the bumper. But why I mention the flat is because it's really on the flat that we're all a bit preoccupied at the minute, or one of the hot topics is weight for age. The weight for age scale, does it need to be adjusted because we're getting powerful 3-year-olds who are making short work of their older horses? The weight for age means that younger horses get weight from the older horses because they are perceived to be not as mature. Now, what weight that should be is the topic for discussion. And it's trying to sort of one size fits all. It's not. It matters more to some horses than others. That's just natural physics. But the reason I mention this is because it's something that doesn't get talked about that much over jumps, but it's really significant to the champion bumper because AC Milan is only a 4-year-old, and that means he gets £8 off the 5-year-olds. Not many 4-year-olds has ever run and contested the champion bumper. Q-Card was one when he won at a big price. Last year the runner-up was only a 4-year-old. But it is a big thing, and it's something that's not really being talked about or factored in that much. But when you add in AC Milan's £8 that he gets off the 5-year-old upwards, combine that with what he did at Newbury. Basically, if AC Milan does what he did at Newbury, it's going to take the best performance in the history of the champion bumper to beat him because of that hugely significant £8 weight advantage that he gets. Holographic was taken out of the champion bumper. That was one of the joint favourites before. Big Willie Mullins Hope, who was taken out today. So AC Milan, I've tried not to talk too much about weights and measures and times because I know that I bore myself sometimes, and I'm sure that I bore you at home. But this is a real weights and measures story with AC Milan. No one's really mentioned that he's only a 4-year-old and gets £8. That's a huge deal when you've got the form and the power that he's got. So he's a Cheltenham winner with a big allowance and with a big hope attached to him. And he's one of those horses who you can say, I know that the Cheltenham bumper is fueled by rumour, it's fueled by whispers, and yes, something does come from left field and often raise its game appreciably. But in terms of everything that we can quantify so far, all the data says that the AC Milan is ahead of the pack by some way.
Now I've just lost. Oh, there you go. Damien's messaged about Native River. We were talking about slightly earlier, and about bouncing. Is there any possibility that he could bounce? What's your sort of stance on bouncing? Because everyone has different opinions about it.
Yeah, I believe in the bounce. It obviously, what influences the bounce is how quick the turnaround is between the comeback run and the target run, and how much effort is put into the comeback run as well. Now, obviously, much like the weight for age, each horse is different. It's physically different, and that obviously impacts on the bounce as well. But we got the lads in the R&D. Tom Heslop did some great work in really studying, really digging down into the record of horses like Native River, like Altior, who effectively sort of hop, skip and jump their way to the festival. The hop is an absence, the skip is that comeback run, and the jump straight into Cheltenham. And the scary statistic was that in the last 12 years, the last dozen years, there's been about 105, 106 chasers who've made that approach, that running blitz approach to Cheltenham, off for a long time, back, bang, and then fail. Because only Riverside Theatre, he's the only horse out of those 106 to win on its comeback and then to sustain those levels to Cheltenham and win the Ryanair. Anyone who remembers the Ryanair that year, it was a hard-fought win for Riverside Theatre. I mean, he looked cooked for most of the way and then managed to grind it out in the end. But there are real pressures on the horse and on the trainer in terms of his management of the horse when it comes to that quick turnaround. And in terms of both Native River and Altior, as easily as they won their Newbury assignments ahead of the Gold Cup for Native River's case and Champion Chase in Altior's case, history tells us, recent history tells us, that alarm bells should be going off with a horse with that sort of approach into Cheltenham. So that is, I believe in the bounce. I believe in a thing called bounce. And the guys who, the statisticians, our mad wizards here at Timeform, have produced some numbers that says, there's a lot in that when you're dealing with championship class horses who are having this blitz approach to Cheltenham. So a good point to raise, Damien. Thanks for that.
Okay, coming towards the end now, if you do have any final questions, do pop them in, and I'm going to steal the limelight here and ask a question I'm surprised hasn't been asked, actually. Every year I was saying to the content team a bit earlier, the bookmakers now, their hype about how much money they're going to lose on day one seems to be like the playoff final. Seems to go up every single year. I've seen £50 million floated around at the moment, and there's this day one fourfold. There's 4 short price runners in Get a Bird, Footpad, Bouverdare and Apple's Jade. If you had a £5 free bet on that, which one would you be the most concerned about in the 4?
I think I'd know my fate early, because out of those 4, Get a Bird is the one who would worry me the most. Not against Get a Bird, but just look at the race. Get a Bird's run twice. He hasn't got the level of experience. He hasn't got the level of form as Vatua, as Duvan, as Min. Those horses, when they went to the Supreme, were all a bigger price than Get a Bird is now. Now it is partly reflective of a potentially thin British challenge amongst the Supreme contenders, but still it's just a price thing purely with Get a Bird, in that when you think about Footpad, Bouverdare and Apple's Jade and how much information there is around those horses, compare that with a Supreme and Get a Bird, very little information to go on with Get a Bird. We knew the hype when he was favourite for the Champion Bumper before injury. We're aware of the hype now, but on the track, although it's been really good, really promising, really positive, it hasn't been that much better than other novices out there. And the Supreme is just a bit of a guessing game still as to who's the best horse out there, the best novice out there. So my worry in that particular fourfold would be at 130, thereabouts. If you clear that hurdle, I think you're probably home and hosed.
Famous last words. And we're coming towards the end now. I'll squeeze a couple more in. I'm staggered that no one's asked about the Prestbury Cup. I thought that would be the... No, just
ask me that last so I can walk out when you ask me.
I might be putting you on the spot a little bit here, but Mark has asked for an each way lucky 50.
Each way lucky 15. D's to BF. Martin Pipe, that's my big handicap fancy.
I'm glad you pronounced that and not me.
Each way lucky 15. Tully East, Brown Advisory Plate. Won it last year, lined up this year. There's 2. 3 is...
I'll comment these because apologies for
I can only go in the handicaps really, can't I? If it's
I suppose unless you've got a fancy and
I
a
don't
Gold Cup at a big price.
I don't do big prices at all.
Mark's commenting. Good man.
D's to BF, Martin Pipe, Tully East, Brown Advisory Plate. Sorry, but these are all sort of horses in the handicaps who are prominent in the betting, but still each way prices. You know, normally 10 to 1 is an each way price, but just because the market has these at the front and the 10 to 1, I still think these are each way prices. So D's to BF, Martin Pipe, Tully East in the Brown Advisory, Theinval, Theinval in the Grand Annual, 3rd last year. Nicky's been minding it, let's say that, for this year's Grand Annual, and it's off the same mark. And finally, easy one, We Have a Dream in the Triumph Hurdle.
Very much the forgotten horse of the Henderson too there, really.
I talked about education with Radichin, saying that he's got really good education, but in terms of time on the track and in terms of going through different processes, We Have a Dream actually has certainly got the most education and the most experience of the field. And I think that his price reflects what he did at Musselburgh last time when he was unimpressive, rather than what he did and the direction he was going before then. So he was supposed to run in the Victor Ladorum at Haydock. Nicky, in Nicky's way, didn't want a hard race on bad ground so close to the festival, so he rerouted him to Musselburgh, which probably isn't his track and which certainly didn't fit in with his training regime to get him to Cheltenham. So there's loads of reasons to explain why We Have a Dream didn't knock you out when he won at Musselburgh, but look at what he did in the finale, look at what he did at Doncaster more to the point, think about the likes of Top Notch in particular, who he's almost a mirror image of, and when he was second to Peace and Co last year. So We Have a Dream in the Triumph. He's the one horse in that Triumph who I think, well actually, he's definitely going to run his race and definitely be in the first 3.
I'm going to gate crash here because I'm going to turn it into a lucky 63.
You've got one.
And you're not going to, I don't think you're going to agree with it considering what you said earlier on.
Yeah.
I wrote the preview for the microsite a few weeks ago and I put up Black Cawthon each way for the RSA just because I think he's had a barnstorming season.
Yeah.
He's really racked up a partnership with Frosty, who's continually showing how good she is. And I just think you can't knock his place claims. And considering if any other horse had won the races he had, I know he's been fortunate, he'd be a lot shorter, and I just think at around I think he's about 8 to 1 at the moment. You can't really, I can see him running into a place.
Yeah, well, the one thing you know about Black Cawthon is that if you can keep your head while all around are losing theirs, then yours is the RSA, my son. No, but that's the whole point with Black Cawthon is that he's such a little pro that he's not going to be phased and he's not going to underperform. You wouldn't think Nichols is too good at that. Black Cawthon has got too much history for that. So he's definitely. If you had to put your life on one horse running to its rating at Cheltenham, well, Black Cawthon will be on the short list because of all the things that he's built up and the experience he's got.
And we have seen. I'm right. Was Jury Duty in this last year? Was he in another race?
He was in the Pertemps.
He was in the Pertemps. I'm getting mixed up with another. I'm sure in thinking the RSA before has had well-backed horses that haven't turned up.
Oh,
It is a race, as you say, with Black Lion, a race where sometimes
Don
attitude can count for a lot.
Don Cossack was one. I can't think off the top of my head. If Phil's still watching, he'll be shouting, I'm sorry, Phil. But the RSA is littered with well-meaning gambles that go astray because the RSA tends to be a shock to the system because of the way it's run, because of the time of year it's run, and because of the hoopla around it as well. But yeah.
Okay, we'll go with one more question, and we're running out. I don't know, is there any that are shouting out to you? Is there anyone you want to pick out here?
William Henry. I saw William Henry
sorry.
there. Yeah. I've mentioned I've lent very heavily on our R&D team who produce all these great stats and do all these deep dives into the data. I mentioned D's to BF for the Martin Pipe, strong handicap fancy for him. part of that reason is that our team, our R&D team, analysed which handicaps were the hottest form of the season based on time, based on subsequent performance. And in the top 5 was the Lanzarote, which DBF finished 5th, but that was sort of an early stage of his career, and you can excuse him for not having that big power punch in the finish at that stage. But William Henry won that race and won it really convincingly, and yeah, he's going to have James Bourne again for sure. The strength of that form, coupled with the fact that he seems to be really living up to his reputation now, means the Coral Cup looks he's the right favourite for the Coral Cup for sure.
Okay, we'll wrap it up there, and thank you very much for your questions.
Everyone.
Jamie.
Thank you, Nick.
Thank you very much. I'll leave you with this question: who wins the Presbury Cup?
See you, everyone.